Clara Whitmore never imagined her second chance at love would become the very spark that destroyed her family. Years earlier, her world had been ripped apart when her first husband died in a brutal car accident. One moment she was a wife, and the next a widow, left alone with 3 daughters to raise. Grace, the eldest, wise beyond her 24 years. Sienna, just 21, fiery, sarcastic, and free-spirited. And little Lila, only 19, timid, quiet, always hiding behind the shadows of her sisters. Clara carried it all. The bills, the grocery lists, the school fees, the endless doctor's visits. Her job at a small local clinic barely kept the lights on. Most nights she collapsed into bed exhausted, her body drained, her spirit hollow. And when the house grew silent, when her daughters slept, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, fighting back the suffocating weight of loneliness. True, her children gave her purpose, but nothing could replace the ache of an empty side of the bed, the ache of being unseen as a woman. And then, David Whitmore entered her life. David was no stranger to loss himself. His wife had died after a long battle with cancer, leaving him with a son, Noah, who was just stepping into adulthood. Like Clara, David carried wounds that time hadn't healed. But there was something in his presence, a gentleness, a calmness, that felt like shelter after a storm. He didn't try to sweep her away with grand gestures. He simply listened. He understood. And he looked at Clara not as a worn-out single mother, but as a woman who still deserved to be loved. Their connection deepened quickly. Within months, David and Noah moved into Clara's modest home. And for the first time in years, the Whitmore house was full again. Meals were louder. The walls echoed with laughter. Grace debated books at the table. Sienna cracked jokes that made her sisters roar with laughter. Lila, timid little Lila, began to smile more. Even Noah, quiet and reserved, started joining in, helping with chores, talking about school, and settling into this new, blended family. Clara would catch herself pausing in those moments, her chest swelling with a fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had rebuilt what she lost. A real family. And for a short while, everything seemed perfect. Dinners with clinking silverware. Lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and pancakes. The smell of fresh laundry drifting through the halls. Clara whispered silent prayers at night, thanking God for giving her another chance. But what Clara couldn't see, what none of them could see, was that beneath the laughter, beneath the smiles and small talk, something darker was beginning to stir. A storm was already forming. A storm that would one day tear everything apart. At first, Noah Whitmore seemed almost invisible. The 22-year-old kept mostly to himself, his grief still raw from losing his mother. He spent long hours locked away in his room, headphones on, hunched over his laptop. To Clara, it was simply the way young men coped with loss. Quiet, withdrawn. But slowly, he began to emerge from the shadows. It started small, a smile over dinner, helping Clara carry groceries, offering to fix the squeaky door that had annoyed the girls for months. Then, little by little, he began weaving himself into their lives. With Lila, the shy youngest sister, he bonded over video games. Side by side on the couch, their laughter echoing down the hallway, the glow of the television painting their faces. For Sienna, the sharp-tongued middle child, he endured her reality TV marathons, rolling his eyes at her commentary but never leaving the room. And with Grace, the responsible eldest, he found deeper conversations, books, philosophy, the kind of late-night talks that stretch past midnight. On the surface, it looked innocent, even beautiful. Clara would watch from the kitchen doorway, her heart swelling. "They're becoming real siblings," she told David with a smile. "Isn't it wonderful?" And David would nod, proud, relieved. A blended family was never easy, but maybe theirs was working. What they didn't know was that inside Noah's mind, something had already begun to shift. One humid afternoon, Grace stepped out of the bathroom after a shower, wrapped in nothing but a towel. She didn't know Noah was walking up the stairs at that exact moment. Their eyes met. A single second, no words. She kept walking. He froze. But that single second was enough. Something ignited inside him, something he couldn't shake. From that day forward, he didn't just see Grace as his stepsister. He saw her as a fantasy, a temptation. At first, he convinced himself it was nothing more than a harmless crush, a fleeting thought. But it grew, festering like an infection. Soon, he noticed everything. The way she brushed her hair into a bun, the curve of her lips when she read, the softness of her laugh. Innocent details that, in his twisted mind, became intimate. And then, he started creating opportunities. Waiting by the kitchen doorway when she poured tea. Timing his steps so they accidentally bumped in the hallway. Commenting on her outfits. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to plant seeds. Grace noticed. She wasn't naive. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe he was just friendly. Maybe he didn't understand boundaries. But soon, she realized there was something in his eyes, a raw, hungry energy that sent a chill through her chest. And yet, she didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell her sisters. She didn't shut it down. Maybe part of her felt flattered. Maybe part of her wanted to believe it was all harmless. One late night, with the house quiet and the lights dim, Grace sat on the couch watching TV. The screen flickered, casting shadows across the living room. Noah joined her silently, sitting just inches away. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The show played, but they weren't watching. The silence between them was louder than any dialogue. When Grace finally turned to meet his eyes, Noah leaned in and kissed her. For a moment, just one moment, time stopped. She could have pulled away. She could have ended it. But she didn't. That night, the line was crossed. Quiet, rushed, reckless. And once crossed, there was no turning back. What happened between Grace and Noah should have ended there. A single mistake, buried in silence. But secrets have a way of growing. And this one grew like wildfire. Their stolen glances became stolen moments. The brush of a hand became an embrace. The embrace became nights together, quiet, reckless nights hidden behind a locked bedroom door. Grace lived caught between guilt and thrill. During the day, she played the role of dutiful daughter, caring sister. At night, she slipped into a world she could never speak of. And Noah? He thrived in the secrecy. The more dangerous it felt, the more he craved it. For weeks, they believed they had hidden it well. Until one evening, the door wasn't locked. Sienna and Lila had gone out for a movie, returning earlier than expected. They pushed open Grace's bedroom door and froze. What they saw shattered the illusion of normalcy in an instant. Grace and Noah together. Not as siblings. Not as family. But as something else entirely. The girl screamed. Grace shot up, scrambling for words. Noah froze, his face pale, his breath shallow. For a moment, it seemed like the family would explode right then and there. Fury, disgust, chaos. But what followed was far more disturbing. After the initial shock, after the shouting and tears, something strange crept into the air. The rage gave way to silence. And then curiosity, confusion, even envy. Grace begged them not to tell their mother. Please, you don't understand, she whispered, tears streaming. But it was Noah who spoke next. Calm, smooth, serpent-like. He took them aside, one by one, his words soft and poisonous. It's not wrong, he told them. Love is complicated. Families can be whatever we choose. No one has to know. This is special. You deserve to feel chosen too. Sienna, rebellious, fiery Sienna, was the first to cave. For her, it was defiance. A way to spit in the face of rules, morality, and every expectation ever placed on her. Lila resisted longer. Sweet, fragile Lila, trembling and ashamed. But no one knew how to twist the knife. He gave her attention, whispered lies, made her feel like she wasn't invisible anymore. And slowly, she surrendered. One by one, all three sisters crossed that same line. The guilt? It melted away. What started as shock became indulgence. And soon, it wasn't just a secret affair. It was a shared pact. A pact built on whispers and locked doors. A pact of lust, secrecy, and recklessness. They even built a system. When one sister spent the night with Noah, the others stayed quiet. No jealousy. No fights. Only silence and complicity. The Whitmore sisters, once bound by blood, now bound by something unspeakable. And Noah? He sat at the center, pulling the strings. His fantasy had become reality. Clara, meanwhile, carried on in blissful ignorance. She saw only smiles around the dinner table, laughter drifting from the living room. Look at them, she told David one evening, her voice full of pride. They've become so close. Like true siblings. David smiled. He believed it too. Neither of them had the faintest idea that their family was rotting from the inside out. For weeks, the pact held. The whispers continued. The nights behind locked doors became routine. To them, it no longer felt dangerous, it felt normal. But when sin becomes routine, recklessness always follows. What began as stolen moments soon turned into something darker. They wanted more than just secrecy. They wanted proof, memories, something to relive. And so, they began recording. Sometimes it was Noah who set up the camera, his grin sharp and shameless. Other times it was Sienna, daring and defiant, egging the others on. To them, it was a thrill, a fantasy captured in pixels. They told themselves no one would ever see it, that it would stay hidden, locked away. But arrogance is a dangerous thing. One night, after their indulgence, Sienna saved a video to her laptop, not carefully tucked away in some encrypted folder, not hidden behind passwords or deleted the next morning. No, it sat there, in plain sight. A file waiting like a landmine. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. And still, the laptop held their darkest secret. The sisters didn't think twice. They laughed, they joked, they lived as though the world would never find out. And Noah? He reveled in it, blind to the danger that loomed just a heartbeat away. What none of them realized was that the recording, that one careless decision, was not just a souvenir. It was a weapon. And soon, that weapon would detonate. Because in that home, there was still a mother who believed her family was safe, a mother who believed the laughter in her house was genuine, a mother who had no idea that the very walls around her hid betrayal so deep it could shatter her soul. And one ordinary Sunday morning, Clara Whitmore was about to find it. It was a Sunday morning, the kind Clara Whitmore cherished most. The air was soft, the house quiet. The smell of rice simmered in the kitchen, sunlight spilled lazily through the curtains, and for once, life didn't feel like a battle. David had taken Noah out for hardware shopping. The girls were scattered in their rooms. Clara hummed to herself as she dusted, folded clothes, straightened curtains. It felt almost peaceful. When she stepped into Sienna's room, it was just to change the bedsheets. A normal chore, a mother's routine, the kind of small task that keeps a house alive. But on the desk, Sienna's laptop sat open. Clara hardly noticed at first. She wasn't the type to snoop. Maybe it was music, maybe an assignment. She walked past it casually, eyes sweeping over the glow of the screen until she froze. There it was, a paused video frame. Her daughters, Grace, Sienna, and Lila, on a bed, with Noah. Clara blinked. Her mind rejected what her eyes were seeing. No, it can't be, she whispered. She told herself it was a prank, a movie, some cruel joke. But a mother knows. Deep down, her heart already understood. Her hands shook as she lowered herself into the chair. Her finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling. Then, with a single click, the nightmare began. The video played. 8 minutes. That's all it lasted. 8 minutes that aged Clara 20 years. It wasn't just the images, her daughters tangled with the boy she had welcomed into her home. It was the sound, the moans, the laughter, the casual, careless way they joked as though this betrayal were nothing at all. Clara's vision blurred. Her chest caved in, each breath jagged and sharp. Tears streamed down her face faster than she could wipe them away. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. Just a strangled gasp, the sound of a mother watching her family dissolve into ash. How could they? The question echoed in her mind, over and over. How could they do this? To me? To each other? Every memory replayed in her head like cruel taunts. Grace's quiet evenings, Sienna's odd mood swings, Lila's sudden shyness. Noah's lingering glances at the dinner table. It had all been there, right in front of her, and she had missed it. The betrayal wasn't a crack in her heart. It was a canyon. Clara sobbed. Not soft tears, guttural cries that tore through her throat, leaving it raw. She slammed the laptop shut, as though closing it could erase what she'd seen. But the images were burned into her brain. And slowly, the tears dried. Her breathing steadied. Her hands stopped trembling. What replaced the grief was something colder, heavier. A storm, no longer wild, but focused. Rage. She rose to her feet and stared into the mirror on Sienna's wall. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. But what stared back at her wasn't a broken mother anymore. It was something else, something harder. The betrayal had twisted her love into something unrecognizable. She no longer saw her children as daughters. She saw them as traitors, parasites that had eaten away the family she fought so hard to build. And Noah, The boy she welcomed, fed, and trusted. He was the serpent that had poisoned them all. Punishment. The word rang in her mind like a bell. Punishment. Blood. Cleanse. That night, Clara served dinner as though nothing had changed. She smiled. She laughed. She asked Sienna about her project, teased Grace about her book. Noah cracked open a soda and talked about some new game. No one noticed the storm inside her. But Clara noticed something else, the knife rack by the kitchen. Her eyes lingered there a moment too long. When the house fell silent, when the others drifted to sleep, Clara sat by the window, staring into the night. Her knees pulled to her chest, her body motionless. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't feel hollow. She didn't feel human. She felt certain. By midnight, the decision was already made. The family she thought she built was gone. And in its place, monsters slept upstairs. Monsters who would never wake the same again. The house was silent. Too silent. Clara Whitmore rose from her place by the window. It was well past midnight. She moved like a shadow, slow, deliberate, her bare feet whispering against the cold kitchen tiles. Her eyes fixed on the knife rack. Her fingers curled around the wooden handle of the largest blade. No hesitation. No trembling. Her heart didn't race. It slowed. The world around her hushed, as though even the night itself was holding its breath. Clara climbed the stairs one creak at a time, each step heavier than the last, each step carrying her further away from the woman she once was. She reached Grace's room first. The door was ajar. Inside, Grace lay tangled in the sheets, her body draped against Noah's bare chest, his arm wrapped lazily around her waist. Their faces peaceful, almost tender. To anyone else, it might have looked like love. To Clara, it was poison. Her eyes welled with tears again, but not from weakness. From sorrow so deep it hollowed her out. She stood in the doorway, watching, a mother who no longer recognized her children. And then she stepped inside. Noah stirred first, half asleep. His eyes blinked open. He squinted at the figure in the doorway. "Mom," he mumbled. She didn't answer. The blade plunged down, fast, brutal, merciless, straight into his chest. The sound wasn't a scream. It was a choking gasp, like his lungs forgot how to breathe. His eyes widened in shock, his body convulsing beneath the sheets. Grace bolted upright, her scream tearing through the night. Blood splattered across her face, the sheets, the wall. "Noah," she shrieked. But Clara was already twisting the knife. Again and again, her face blank, her movements cold and mechanical. Grace scrambled off the bed, falling hard to the floor. "Mom, stop. Please. What are you doing?" But Clara's eyes were hollow, empty, beyond reach. She yanked the knife free and turned her gaze on Grace. Grace tried to crawl backward, her hands slipping in her brother's blood. She reached for the door, but Clara grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back inside. Grace's screams were animalistic, raw, pleading. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. Please don't." The blade rose and came down. Once, twice, 3 times. By the third strike, the screams stopped. Grace's body went limp beside Noah's, their blood pooling together across the mattress and floor. The air reeked of iron. The room echoed with silence. But Clara wasn't finished. She stepped back into the hall, her nightgown drenched in red. The next door creaked open. Sienna stood there, frozen. Her eyes widened at the sight of her mother. "Emma," she whispered, "not Mom. Not Ma. Just Emma." Clara's face was calm, her voice low. "You destroyed everything." Sienna staggered backward, shaking her head. "Please don't. Please don't do this." Clara advanced, step by step. Sienna bolted, trying to slam the door. But Clara shoved her way inside. The two collided, stumbling onto the bed. Sienna fought like hell. She scratched at her mother's arms, kicked, bit down hard enough to draw blood. Her screams were desperate, feral. But Clara's strength was fueled by fury. The blade slashed, stabbed, cut. Again. Again. Sienna's cries grew weaker, fading into sobs, then whispers, then nothing. Her body stilled. The bed soaked dark beneath her. Only one remained. Down the hall, Lila pressed herself against her locked door, trembling violently. She had heard everything. Every scream. Every thud. The sound of her sisters begging for mercy. Her hands shook against the wood. "It's not real," she whispered. "It's not real. It's just a nightmare. Please, please let it be a nightmare." And then, the doorknob rattled. "Open the door, Lila." Clara's voice came, soft, almost gentle. Lila sobbed harder. Mom, please. Please, I didn't want this. I'm sorry. I was scared. I made a mistake. The rattling stopped. Silence. Lila held her breath, terrified. Minutes passed. Then, a crash. The front door burst open. Clara. David's voice boomed through the house. I forgot my wallet. His footsteps echoed up the stairs. Then he stopped. His eyes locked on the horror. Blood smeared across the walls. His son's body collapsed in Grace's room. A lifeless arm stretching into the hall. The silence of death thick in the air. And there, at the end of the hallway, Clara, kneeling outside Lila's room, her hands dripping, the knife dangling loosely from her fingers. Her eyes hollow, her face empty. David gasped. My God, what did you do? Clara turned her head slowly. Tears streaked through the blood on her cheeks. Her lips trembled as she whispered. I had to. I saw what they did. I saw everything. All of them with him. Together. David's knees buckled. He stumbled into the rooms. First Noah's, then Grace's, then Sienna's. Each body tore his soul apart. When he reached Grace, he collapsed to the floor, his cry ripping through the house, a sound more animal than human. He wept into his daughter's blood. There were no words left. Only the unbearable silence of 3 children gone. And behind the locked door, Lila wept, whispering prayers to a God she feared had abandoned her. The sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains. By dawn, Clara Whitmore was let out in handcuffs, barefoot, her nightgown soaked in blood, her eyes glassy, hollow, unblinking. David stood by the doorway, clutching Lila to his chest, his shirt stained with blood, not his, not hers, but the blood of his son and the daughters he had helped raise. The family they had tried to rebuild was gone, destroyed, and the house that once held laughter was now nothing more than a crime scene. The massacre shook the small town like an earthquake. By sunrise, the story was already spreading beyond the neighborhood. Mother kills her children after discovering incestuous secret. The headlines screamed from every television screen. Talk shows dissected it. Social media burned with outrage, speculation, and disbelief. But for David Whitmore, there was no headline big enough to capture his loss. His son, his stepdaughters, his wife, now a murderer, and Lila, left clinging to life, shattered by trauma too heavy for 19 fragile years. The trial began just weeks later. The courthouse overflowed. Reporters, activists, lawyers, curious neighbors. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had destroyed her own family. Clara entered the courtroom in shackles, wearing a gray prison jumpsuit. Her once neat hair hung loose, her eyes dull, her face drained of all warmth. She did not look like a monster. She looked like a ghost. The prosecution painted her as one anyway. A cold-blooded killer. A woman who executed her children not out of protection, but out of jealousy and madness. They showed photographs of the crime scene, walls streaked with blood, lifeless bodies sprawled across mattresses. They called it cruelty. They called it evil. But when it was Clara's turn to speak, the courtroom shifted. Her voice was steady, almost eerily calm. She did not deny what she had done. She did not beg for forgiveness. Instead, she told her truth. She spoke of the years she spent raising her daughters alone, fighting against poverty and loneliness. She described how David brought hope back into her life, how Noah once seemed like a quiet, respectful boy. And then, she described the video. The courtroom stirred uncomfortably. Some covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Clara's voice cracked as she explained what she saw. Her daughters, her babies, with Noah. Not once, not by accident, but willingly. Together. It was not hate, she said softly. It was loss. I lost them before I even knew I had lost them. The judge demanded evidence. Her attorney produced a USB drive. Against every instinct, the court played a fragment of the video. Muted. Censored. But enough. The silence in that room was suffocating. The judge's jaw clenched. Jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one spoke. David was called to the stand. His testimony tore through the courtroom like a blade. He did not speak as a husband, not even as a father. He spoke as a man whose entire family had collapsed into horror. He described walking into the house that night, the trail of blood across the hallway, the lifeless body of his only son. He spoke of Grace, reaching for the door with her arms stiff in death, of Sienna, broken in her bed, of Lila, weeping behind a locked door, whispering prayers to a God who might not have been listening. His voice trembled. His eyes glistened. But he did not condemn Clara. He did not defend her either. "I lost everything," David said, his voice hoarse. But so did she. The jury deliberated for days. This was not a simple case of murder. It was a storm of betrayal, taboo, grief, and rage. Clara had killed 3 people. But had she also been driven beyond reason by a discovery so grotesque, so incomprehensible, that her mind simply broke? The verdict finally came. Guilty of second-degree murder. But the court acknowledged extreme psychological trauma and mitigating emotional distress. Clara Whitmore was sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole. No one cheered. No one sighed in relief. It didn't feel like justice. It just felt tragic. After sentencing, Lila refused to see her mother again. She moved in with her aunt in another city, changed her last name, and deleted every photo of her sisters. Not out of hatred, but because the pain was unbearable. At night, she still heard the screams. She still saw the blood. She still dreamed of her mother's voice whispering through the door. "Open it, Lila. Just talk to me." David sold the house. He packed only a suitcase and disappeared. No destination. No plan. Just a hollow man trying to outrun the memory of stepping over his son's body. And Clara? In a women's correctional facility miles away, she became a ghost in gray. She spoke to no one unless spoken to. She skipped group sessions, skipped chapel. She kept a notebook instead, filled with apologies to her daughters, lullabies she once sang, memories of birthdays and Christmases long gone. On the wall of her cell, she carved tiny marks on the dates of their birthdays. Every year, quiet scratches only she ever saw. The world moved on. Other scandals came. New headlines replaced the old. But for those who lived it, for David, for Lila, for Clara herself, the horror never faded. Some tragedies don't end when the verdict is read. They linger. They bleed. They stain the soul forever. The story of the Whitmore family eventually faded from the headlines. Reporters moved on. Talk shows found new scandals. Social media found fresh outrage. To the world, it was just another bizarre true crime case, filed away, replaced by the next tragedy. But for the ones who lived it, the horror never ended. David wandered, a man without a home, without a purpose. Everywhere he went, he carried the memory of blood on his hands. Not his, not Lila's, but his son's, his stepdaughter's, his wife's crime. He had once dared to believe love could heal loss. Now he knew. Sometimes love only deepens the wound. Lila grew older, but the child inside her stayed frozen in that locked bedroom. Every scream still echoed in her ears. Every thud of the knife still shook her bones. She changed her name, buried her past, tried to become someone else. But at night, when the world went quiet, she heard her mother's voice calling through the door. "Open it, Lila. Just talk to me." And Clara, in prison, she became a shadow. She never joined the prayer groups, never sought redemption from the chaplain. Instead, she wrote apologies, lullabies, memories, scratches on the wall marking the birthdays of the daughters she had both birthed and destroyed. She never cried anymore, not because the pain was gone, but because it had calcified, turned to stone inside her. The Whitmore family was gone. 3 lives buried, 1 imprisoned, 1 lost to wandering grief, 1 condemned to remember. And that house, once filled with laughter, dinners, the smell of coffee, and warm rice, stood empty. Its walls carried stains no paint could cover. Its floors held memories no cleaning could erase. Some horrors don't fade with time. They don't heal. They don't forgive. They linger, like blood in the floorboards, like screams in the night, like the shadow of a mother standing in a doorway, knife in hand, love turned into rage. And that is the true story of the Whitmores, a family that tried to rebuild, only to be torn apart by a secret too dark to survive.